did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap-ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't missing my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues. Guess if you ain't at the table, you on the menu, and I'm that spitter, baby. They don't want you to see, but everybody's south of Capitol Hill's rocking with me. Boys smoke the trays and ponder getting their life together. I'm comfortable with my role, so I'm like, whatever. Me? I ain't got a job, but I work hard. And you don't work hard, but you got a job. The irony is I'm judged while you feel the applause. I'm slept on, that's why I had to set this alarm. My dudes is armed, I'm armed with this arm charm. Body banging like she got that cream from Barry Bonds. Yeah.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
That trade season is here, a real hitter with a mic, I'm everything that they fear. With that hood ain't the same, I was all on their ass, I'm level-headed. So yo, my dudes love when I spaz, and I'm so over Seattle's passive-aggressive attitude. They don't call you back, what they really saying is F you. While I'm from the same place, I move at a different pace. I prefer if you just said it to my face, damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it
I hate
for
these
us.
average dudes with they average spit, writing average rhymes, knocking average chicks. The closer I get, I can feel the people starting to shift. I'm loyal to a fault, and everybody can't come with. Rap's a rich man's game, I'm only playing with change. They bang models and singers, I'm knocking my own flame, I'm different. The crowd, I move with the chosen few. Black thoughts, I could be the front man for the roots. No diamonds and gold, I'm on my sticks and stones. If we can see your panty line, you should have on a thong. My team is strong, through this fire we forged a bond. And they already know what it is when I get on. To the hearse, party like it's December 31st. When I'm on my deathbed, I probably cracking my nurse. You ain't got the bars to compete, I'm a verbal athlete. Deflating these boys so they say that I cheat. Damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Yeah. I should probably start by apologizing for the long wait, man. You know, I know I be tripping. But I'm not just a rapper, I'm an artist. And, you know, my creative process is a little bit different than most. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everybody out to the Dre's Experience. I got TCF in the building, my whole camp's here with me. I got the band in here laying this cool-ass vibe. And I'm Seattle's own. Let's get into it.
I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
All right, good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Morning Update Show. My partner in crime, Trey Holiday, she's out for the week on a much-deserved vacation. I'm joined today, got a special co-host, Colleen Echohawk.
Hey, good to see you. I'm super jealous of Triana, but I'm so excited to be here with you.
All right, excited that you're here as well. We got a good discussion today. The first part of the show, where we're going to talk about issues that are impacting the Native community, you know, locally and nationally. And in the second part of the show, you know, we saw you on the news yesterday talking about this issue at Bitter Lake, and you talked about a homeless plan, and so we'll talk about that as well.
Great. Well, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me, and look forward to a great conversation.
All right, good stuff. Once again, welcoming everybody to the Morning Update Show and reminding you right now, it's the perfect opportunity to tag and share the stream. Go ahead and tag and share the stream with people who you feel would benefit from culturally relevant news and information emanating from right here in the Emerald City. Want to give a big shout out to our partners over there at the South Seattle Emerald and KBCS 91.3 over at Bellevue College. Also want to remind everybody that you can catch the Morning Update Show on podcast anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcast. Just put in Converge Media Network and you can listen to the Morning Update Show. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people, by the way, that are listening to us on podcast. A lot of people are going back to work. We could tell people are going back to work because the way they consume our show is different now. It's either later in the day or on podcast, stuff like that.
Yeah, because I used to listen to it live when I'd be working and have it on another screen or something. But now
you in the streets.
Now I'm on the streets. I got people to talk to. I got things to do. It's been fun.
Well, good stuff. So we do have one. It's not necessarily a headline, but it's something here to discuss. To bring up that it was 1 year ago today that the Seattle Police Department abandoned the East Precinct. We got a small clip right here.
The lieutenant has now come out, and the police are now moving out. The street is going to open up. The street. Just ask them to hold. Ask them to hold the line. Ask them to hold the line. Ask them to hold the line. And ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in over a week, Pine Street is now open. Pine Street is open. The police have cleared the way. The lieutenant is at the top of the hill. Here now we finally get a closer look at the East Precinct. We can see that it's boarded up. We see chain link fence around it. Says no trespassing. Now, definitely don't think that anybody was being disingenuous when they said it's not being abandoned. But my friends, looks abandoned. We see the SWAT vehicles over here, special weapons and tactics. These guys are loading onto their vehicles, and it looks like they're getting ready to head out over here on 12th Avenue. We see a bicyclist now. He's coming down. Are you coming down? You'd be the first person to cross Pine Street. There it is. There's the first two people right here to cross Pine Street and 12th in over a week. There it is. These are the first people to cross by this. Here's the East Precinct right here. As the protesters now head east. They're heading east past the East Precinct. If you're a protester, you consider this a victory, a moral victory, a total victory in that sense. And like I said, for the first time here in over a week, people are actually walking freely on Pine Street on Capitol Hill.
So that was one year ago today. It's interesting because when we were reporting early in that day, because we were there on the ground, they're like, yo, these guys are abandoning this precinct. They were like taking their plaques off the walls and everything. But, the Seattle Police Department was messaging like, no, we're just reducing our footprint. It was like, man, they've abandoned this precinct. Yeah. We're here a year later, and we still don't know who gave the order to abandon the precinct.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching and just thinking that same thing, like who did it, what happened, and there's still no clarity on that, which I think is a real shame and an injustice for our community. We deserve as community to know what happened. So I hope that, we have some legal action later on this year that helps illuminate that a little bit. But, I was sitting there thinking, like, what was it like for you? As you just like just talking so eloquently and like dealing with it, but there must have been so much emotion.
I'll tell you, so that day, we were broadcasting, just like last week, people saw us up there on Capitol Hill. We were broadcasting the morning update show from Cal Anderson Park. And early in that morning, they were actually putting a fence across the street. We got it on tape. There was like a 15-foot fence that they were putting across Pine Street. And then sometime between 11 a.m. and maybe 2 p.m., a decision was made somewhere, and they took that fencing down and started boarding up the East Precinct. So we saw it all play out in real time. I think that the city needs resolution on things. And, if it's bad news, it's bad news. Good news is good news. But resolution, I don't think that the Chief Best did herself or the city a favor by just being like, it wasn't me, it was whatever. Like, if you're going to come out and say something, just say it so we can move forward. In just the pulse of the streets, OPA is investigating, but, general public doesn't have a lot of faith in OPA, but we'll see what they say.
Yeah. Well, I'm really anxious to see what they say, and also, hopeful that there's some investigation on those texts. I think that we need to know, like, what happened. Even, with having the chief's text being gone, with the fire chief text being gone, it just is so suspicious. It's like someone wrote a mystery film for us to be a part of, and I don't like it. Get me out of that film.
I'll say this is that city government and some of these departments, they do the citizens a disservice by just not coming forward.
And being honest.
So they're putting the city through all of this, and the people of the city through a year investigation that's still not open.
Yeah.
Man, the police know who did it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I mean, that's the thing. They know who did it. These guys know what's going on with their text messages, but they're putting the citizens through this. And in doing that, this is why the citizen stakeholders of the Emerald City lose faith and trust in government. Because you know what? Just come out with it, man. This is what it was, and we can deal with it and move on.
If the mayor's office had just come out and said, listen, somehow these texts are gone, and not try to recreate them from other people's phones, I would have had a lot more respect and been like, okay, well, some things do happen, but you're right. Accountability, transparency, it has to happen because we have a lot of other things we need to do, right? Like this is it's not, I mean, I'm interested, right? Like I want to know what happened, but there's a lot of other things in the city that need to be taken care of, and we have a lot of other work ahead of us. So I want to get this behind us.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess a good way to get behind it is if we can get Director Meyerberg, OPA, let's see what their findings are around it, and hopefully it'll bring some resolution, and we'll see. But moving on to what's an international story, even though it's just north of us here on the border. And we talked about this yesterday, was up there in Kamloops, Canada, and the discovery of the remains of 215 children that were there at the boarding school. And I talked about this yesterday on air, and it was it was impactful. And I'm glad that you were available to come in here today because this is something we want to talk about. We'll play this clip right here. This is from CBS.
Welcome back to CBS This Morning. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is apologizing to Indigenous Canadians after the remains of more than 200 Indigenous children were found last week. Some were as young as 3. Many from Indigenous communities gathered this week to honor the lives lost. The remains were discovered in Kamloops, British Columbia, at what was once Canada's largest residential school for Indigenous children. Our national correspondent Jerika Duncan spoke with a survivor. Jerika, good morning.
Good morning. This is such a dark chapter of history for Canada that needs to be told. The Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia used to have at least 51 confirmed deaths on its official record. Well, sadly, one survivor told us he was not surprised to find out at least 215 more students were found buried there.
Sometimes kids would not show up in classroom. They would disappear for the next day, and we knew that they were gone, but we didn't know where they were gone.
Gary Gottfriedson is a survivor of the Kamloops Indian Residential School. He's among the thousands of Indigenous peoples legally mandated by the Canadian government to attend such institutions. They were set up in the late 1800s and often operated by the Catholic Church. The last one closed in 1997. University of Alberta professor Crystal Gale Fraser says abuse was rampant.
The whole point was to erase their Indigenous identities. These Indian residential schools have often been compared to prisons.
We were never allowed to speak our languages in there because of fear of punishment. So those of us that were little were absolutely terrified.
A Truth and Reconciliation Commission was formed to investigate abuse at the Indian residential schools. In 2015, it issued a report saying the government committed cultural genocide. At least 4,000 students died at these schools, some of disease, neglect, accidents, or abuse. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Saying sorry for the tragedies of the past is not enough. It's not enough for the children who died, for the families, or for the survivors and communities.
The heinous discovery happened after one of the Canadian First Nations used radar technology on the ground near the school.
Indigenous communities and families have been saying these things for decades, often not notified of deaths. Their children never return home, unable to get any sorts of answers.
In a statement that First Nations chief wrote, the true accounting of the missing students will hopefully bring some peace and closure to those lives lost. As for Godfriedson, he's still haunted by the memories.
We were made to feel ugly because we were told we were ugly. We were made to feel like we were nothing but dirt. And that has remained with me to this very, very day. It's I've never felt that I was good enough for anything.
The Canadian government has paid more than $1.6 billion to survivors of these schools. That 2015 commission recommended 94 calls to action to help the country address its past treatment of Indigenous children. Indigenous communities are now calling for other school sites to also be searched for remains of school children.
Just that phrase, remains of school children, just a horrific situation. But this Truth and Reconciliation Committee is interesting. It's an idea that has been tried in other countries. Not here, though.
Yeah.
Drika, thank you very much.
All right, Colleen, what were your thoughts when this news broke out of Kamloops?
Yeah, well, first I was just horrified, right? Like I felt it at a very emotional level. For the first couple of days, I couldn't really read the articles, and that's because I have very close family members who are boarding school survivors. My uncle, who grew up next door to me my whole life and know him, he's known me since I was a baby. He was a survivor of boarding schools, and he was taken away at the age of 5 years old from my grandma and put in a boarding school where he was beaten for speaking his language, and he only knew the Athabascan language. He was abused in all the ways that are horrific by the hands of, religious people. And so it's very emotional for me because I know and love people who survive that. My uncle tells a story, and he's given me permission to tell a story that he didn't even know what his name was. They only called him a number. He was called number 77. And his older brother, at risk of being beaten and abused, would grab him every time he saw him and would say, your name is not 77. Your name is not 77, and here's what your name is. And so for Native community here in Seattle and around the country, this triggers a lot of emotions, and it also gives me a lot of anger. One of the things that really is so hard about the situation is it's a mass grave. Like, no dignity, no honoring that individual person, just throwing them into a mass grave is so it's so indicative of what they thought of Native children. The way that Native boarding schools were started was this guy named Richard Pratt. He used to run prisons, and he said his famous words were, "Kill the Indian, save the man." And he was just tried to wipe out our whole communities. And if you look at the 1948 United Nations Accords on Genocide, the boarding school systems fit right into removing children from their families, removing children from their cultural identity, trying to turn them into something else, fits into the United Nations definition of genocide. And so I think as a community, as Seattleites, we have to reckon with that. As a larger community, we have to reckon with that. And even though I'm, horrified about what happened there, I'm also glad to see our communities coming together to memorialize them and recognize them.
That's what I was going to ask you. How important is that? All across Canada, different First Nation and Indigenous people, they descended there on Kamloops. I'm sure that if the border crossing was much easier right now, would have had a population going up there. How important is it, even after all these years, that community comes together to honor those children in that grave?
Well, there was about 75 of us who came together on Friday night, and we met at the United Indians of All Tribes Daybreak Star. My friend Cammie Goldhammer, who I love and adore, helped organize this along with Shelley Means, and they organized a memorial to these children. There was 215 recognition of either flowers or like baby shoes, and we sang songs and we memorialized them together in ceremony. And that was really important because at that event here in Seattle, there were folks who were First Nations, because again, the borders was fluid, right? They're a family out there in British Columbia. And so we had many folks who had relatives who had been in Kamloops and, felt it so physically. It was you feel it in your body. There was all these Native folks together, and we memorialized and mourned those babies together, and it was a really good time to do that, and to have that community coming together. But it was also very, very heavy, as you can imagine.
So maybe you can tell us. Clearly, we saw there was a systemic effort to erase culture, erase language and religion. Let's talk about today. What are some of the things on the other end of that spectrum which are infusing culture and infusing language?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the revitalization of Native languages. I know that when I first started working here at Chief Seattle Club, the number one, we did a needs assessment. The number one request was for language. And because language is such a part of cultural identity, there's a lot of communities who are working so hard to revitalize their language programs, to get it instilled in kids from preschool. There's preschool programs that are immersion in the language. So there is, I'm glad you bring it up, because there's incredible resilience and strength happening, even in the middle of, this sorrowful time and, this recognition of what we all kind of suspected had happened, and now it's facts. But there's still this incredible resilience and joy and people pushing forward and saying, well, now we have truth, and let's move forward. I think that there's a strong feeling that there should be more done on the federal government level, and we'll see what happens.
All right, we're going to keep it here for people in our audience. First half of the show, we're talking about issues around Native Americans and Native culture. In the second half, it's just this politics, man. I could stay on this though, like what I'm saying, like the whole hour. But the next thing I wanted to bring up, it was this. I got a clip here. This is from King 5 in 2019. Hold on one second before you play it.
Sure.
But this is 2019. It talks about the Makah Nation. And people who might remember, in 1999, the Makah resumed their treaty right to hunt the gray whale, and it was a big deal. And tribes all across America and Canada actually went out there to support the Makah. And it was Governor Gary Locke who, at the time, with the urging of now Council Member Deborah Juarez, that was the very first time the National Guard was deployed for an Indian to uphold an Indian nation's rights. This clip here is from 2019 with Sea Shepherd basically suing the Makah Nation because they didn't want the Makah to be able to hunt the whale.
It's hard to explain when you grow up by the ocean and you know that this is. It's kind of ingrained in you, like this is who you are.
Like most Makah, Patrick DePoe feels a part of the Pacific.
This ocean is what's important to us. This ocean is who we are.
And it's what the ocean provides that's at the core of his tribe's values. The Makah have hunted whales in these waters for thousands of years. A treaty signed with the U.S. government in 1855 gives them the legal right. The tribe voluntarily stopped hunting in 1922 when whale populations dropped. When those numbers rebounded in the 90s, they decided to hunt again. It made international news, May 17, 1999, when reporters from around the world
in Nia Bay, Eric Wilkinson, King 5 News,
including myself, watched history be reborn.
It was an amazing feeling. It was beautiful.
Patrick DePoe, now a tribal councilman, was 16 years old and right there on the beach when the whale was brought in.
It isn't that we're going out there and trying to slaughter something. It's that we're going out there to take part in a practice, an indigenous belief that we always felt was, essential to our identity, essential to who we are.
Whaling is barbaric.
But animal rights activists couldn't see it more differently. The Sea Shepherd Society tried to stop the '99 hunt with protest boats in the water, and they're now taking their battle to court. Earlier this year, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recommended the tribe be able to kill 20 eastern Pacific gray whales every 5 years. Out of a population of about 27,000, that may not seem like very many, but activists say the population is not stable. Sea Shepherd's Catherine Pruitt says more than 5,000 whales have starved to death on the west coast this year alone. The tribe must now prove to a judge that the hunt would not endanger any whale populations. Pruitt says no one should be killing any whales anywhere, anytime.
These are highly social and sensitive creatures. We should be protecting them. They're so important for ecosystems. As a culture, we need to know not to do this.
There's just no need for it anymore, they would argue. Why the need?
And so once again, it comes back to cultural beliefs. It comes back to religious freedom. It comes back to a legal right.
Who are you to come in and tell them what they can and can't do with their treaty rights and their culture?
We understand that this has been something in their culture for a long time. Even with a history of whaling, there are ways in which they could potentially honor that history by doing something else. The Quileute tribe, for example, has ceremonial whaling.
Beliefs as strong as an ocean current, divisions as deep as the Pacific itself.
It is just unconscionable to consider killing them at this time, or any time.
They're allowed to say or think or feel however they want to feel, but ultimately it's not their decision.
Yeah, well, there you go. Let me hand it to you.
Well, I am 100% always on the side of tribal sovereignty. And so, I grew up in rural Alaska and followed, of course, the Makah nations fight for their treaty rights to, kill whale and hunt whale. But for me, it was always kind of a little strange because I grew up with the knowledge that the folks in northern Alaska, the Inupiaq and the Inuit communities, that was a part of their life. 2 or 3 times a year they would hunt whale, and it would come all the way, because I lived in the interior of Alaska, they would trade it down. It was called muktuk. It was always a big important part of a potlatch to have muktuk. So I've had whale many times and understand the cultural significance of it, because what people don't understand is how many of the tribes are connected in their relationship to whales, right? Like we tend to just forget about the old ways, but the old ways say that we're related to these whales, and that I've heard stories actually in the past couple of years from folks way up north saying, hey, just remember that we have these harpoons and we're in these these canoes practically. These whales, they give themselves to us because they are a part of our community, and they want to make sure that the community is fed and cared for. And they have lots of amazing stories about the whale actually giving it to themselves. So what we don't get in a Western society is how we're related to each other, how we're related to the plants and to the animals, and I think people, just miss out on that
when you talk about Western society, Western society, a lot of it is very much based on ink on paper and law. Yeah. And that treaty actually outdates Washington State.
Yeah,
absolutely. This was Washington territory when that treaty with the United States government was made. Mm-hmm. How often do you feel that the rights, some of these treaty rights go back 140, 150 years or further? How often are these things entrenched upon, either directly or indirectly?
I mean, all the time. One thing that always frustrates me here about Seattle is that everything is bound by Seattle city government, and I'm thinking specifically the waterfront, for instance. The waterfront has been discussed a million times. We have all these designers that come in from New York or whatever. What about Muckleshoot and Suquamish and Duwamish? what is this is their water. This is their resources that we are all benefiting from. And design is so specific around what these
That's
architects
interesting,
and
because city government most times will do a land acknowledgement before any public meeting.
I know. Well, they're getting there. Some don't. Some folks don't even want to do that. So we just have we want to forget, I think, in many communities that long before colonization and settlers moved into this area, there were thriving communities. I talk about that in housing all the time because I've been involved in housing. Long before we had affordable housing, there was thriving housing systems that worked.
Yeah,
that were,
I mean, and the Denny's, they were stuck over there in West Seattle. Like the whole story, guys were like, "Hey, it's cracking over here on the waterfront." I mean, you know, and I mean, long, we got to do another show because you know, just the history. I think that, you know, Seattle's not alone in that, you know, where we uphold and we celebrate Native American culture when appropriate and incorporate it into team names and things like that. But we forget, man, the Duwamish couldn't even walk downtown Seattle after sunset. I mean, and so many other things that were here. I'm just a big person on let's just tell the whole story.
Tell
good,
the truth.
bad, or
tell
indifferent.
The truth. Yep.
Let's just put it out there so we can grow as a city. One more thing for you here real quick. Before we get into politics, is that Deb Haaland, I got just an overlay right here, or a clip right here. Deb Haaland confirmed as first Native American Interior Secretary, and this was back in March. So what does this mean? Like, you know, what was the impact of Deb Haaland becoming the Secretary of the Interior? Deb Haaland said that she's 35th generation New Mexican. So, I mean, she's like taking it back. Like, yo, our people been here for 35 generations. Is there any kind of hopefulness in the Native American community? I know Native Americans ain't a monolith either. So I always say that about black folks. But, you know, I mean, is there a sense of hope of somebody who might have somewhat of a shared experience or journey?
I mean, absolutely. And even before she was confirmed as the secretary, she was, along with Sharice Davis, one of the first Native women to be congresswoman. And when that happened, I was filled with so much joy and excitement to understand that we talk about all the time, representation matters. And so to be able to go to Washington, D.C. and see people that look like me, who have shared experiences. Of course, Native people are not, you know, all the same. However, there are some shared experiences that mean something. And so having her, especially as Secretary of Interior, thinking about all of the land in this country that has long been co-opted by, you know, settler colonialism. Now we have a Native woman, a brilliant Native woman. And, you know, she had to fight super hard to get that. She was absolutely like, you know, people did not want her to be there. But Indian country came in and fought really hard, and I'm incredibly proud.
Yeah, you know, one thing is that the Secretary of the Interior, there's also the Bureau of Indian Affairs that's under there. But it's interesting because, and this is what Deborah Warres, Councilmember Warres pointed out, is that almost everything else in Secretary of Interior is consumable resources, oil, gas, mineral rights, and everything else. And then they put the Native Americans in. She was like, I wonder what they were thinking then, or you know what I'm saying, consumable resource. We're gonna take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about this situation up in Bitter Lake, homelessness here in Seattle. And, you know, let's not forget that you're running for mayor.
Running for mayor. All right. Thanks.
You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city. I did it for the love. I did it for the people. I did it for us.
Back on this rap-ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own, tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
Hey, it's Jake from Converge Media and Get the F Outside. I hope that all of you are taking advantage of the ability to be outdoors and enjoy nature as our summer months heat up. One other thing that you can take advantage of here in the King County area are free COVID-19 vaccinations. There's all kinds of options for pop-up clinics, and the vaccine is able to be administered to anyone 12 years and older. And did I mention that it's free? You don't need insurance, and they don't care what your citizenship status is. And that kind of sounds like the way things should be anyhow, but we'll save that for another conversation. Information and resources are available at kingcounty.gov/COVID, or you can call the COVID-19 call center at 206-477-3977. Washington, we are almost out of this, but we got to stay locked in for the home stretch. Let's get vaxxed out so we can max out our time with friends, family, and in the great outdoors.
All right. Well, that was a quick comeback there. Welcome back to the morning update show. Jake Grav-Bright, and we saw a great episode of GTF Outside. It always trips me up, but yeah, GTF Outside. You can go to our YouTube channel or to our Facebook and check that out, man. Jake Grav-Bright, a very excellent show. I think you would appreciate it. It's all about getting outside, nature and mountains and everything. Yeah, he was just there. He was just up at Denali.
Oh, that's amazing. Denali is so cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
You see what I'm saying? All right, so, I'm politicked out if you can't tell. Everybody's like, man, what are you doing a candidate forum? And what are you doing, man? I mean, I like talking to everybody. I just don't, man. But let's shift gears. Gear is shifted.
Do it.
So a big story right now here in the city of Seattle, really a layer on top of one of the biggest stories is the homelessness issue here in Seattle. And we caught you in an interview yesterday on King 5. We'll play that here now.
Well, Mark, first of all, I want to show you the odd dynamics here in the Bitter Lake neighborhood. You have a sign up that says no camping, and just over my shoulder, you can see where this homeless encampment is. And just beyond that, a soccer game underway here at the Bitter Lake Community Center. Now, the school board president, Chandra Hampson, canceled our planned interview today with 5 minutes notice. So instead, we have to look through past emails to show that the district and the mayor's office have grown acrimonious over what to do here. For 3 months, the district and city have been at odds over how to handle a homeless encampment on school property with kids returning to class, which dates back to a now deleted March Facebook post from Hampson, which demands no sweeps on school grounds. That apparently irked Seattle's Mayor Jenny Durkin, who said she saw the post and wrote that the issues could have been resolved by a phone call. And after high-level conversations a couple weeks later, the city was informed SPS didn't want the encampment removed and said services are the responsibility of the district. The district has since only reinforced a fence before bringing kids back.
Okay, time out.
The issue flared up last Friday when mayoral candidate Bruce Harrell appeared on site calling for a resolution.
Illegal activity.
School board member Liza Rankin wrote King 5 over the weekend to call the situation tiresome and accused the mayor of misrepresenting requests for assistance. What do you think of the situation at Broadview Thompson?
I think the situation has reached a point where our community is really asking for answers and solutions.
Mayoral candidate Colleen Echohawk transitioned people out of homelessness while working for the Chief Seattle Club.
There's no plan. There's finger pointing at City Hall.
She now blames the mayor's office for not negotiating a solution and says there are existing dollars to handle housing the homeless here now.
The deadline has to be back on the city. I think that the city needs to use the FEMA dollars that are there. We are failing our community, and that cannot go on any longer.
This really is a microcosm of what will be the biggest issue in this city in the fall after we move on past the discussion about COVID and vaccinations. As far as Echohawk is concerned, she says she has a 22-point plan to get everyone off the streets in a 14-month period if she is elected. There is a mayoral discussion, and there is also likely going to be a vote on an initiative about homelessness as well. That is the story live in North Seattle. I'm Chris Daniels, King 5 News.
All right, I just want to be honest with you. We ain't got the time in going over no 22 points today. We'll bring you back on that these 22 points. But okay, so a few things there to unpack, and then also I have a few questions for you. But yeah, what's going on? I guess that's the first question.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, overarching question, or reality, is that through the pandemic, the federal government poured in a lot of dollars around for homelessness. And we were able to do things we had never thought we could do before. We moved hundreds and hundreds of people into hotel rooms. We used FEMA dollars, we've used ARPA dollars, we've used all kinds of dollars. The county has done it, but for some reason, the mayor's office has been reluctant to use those FEMA dollars. I have been able to be on national calls with, HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge, where people are saying, yes, use those FEMA dollars, they will be reimbursed. And what is so hard about not using those dollars is that we have an opportunity now to move entire encampments into hotel rooms. And I have been a part of doing that. We've moved here in Pioneer Square whole encampments into hotel rooms together. They went voluntarily. There were no cops. There were no sweeps. They went. And for some reason now, in Bitter Lake and in other places around the city, we have encampments, and we're not moving them, and we're not helping to support the neighborhoods.
Right. So two things. So the mayor's office or the city would say that the FEMA dollars come with different strings attached. And one of the things is that there's no wraparound service dollars. It's basically the shelter. It's the bed and the shelter there. But of course, if you're unhoused, and shelter is better than no shelter. But I know that's one of the things that the mayor is saying, and also that public health. There's something in it that public health also plays a role in moving these people, this population, to into the shelter. What the city is kind of saying, my understanding is it's not as straightforward as what I've seen, because FEMA is very meticulous on their requirements.
Yeah, none of this is easy. I'm not saying that it's easy at all, but what we have to be focused on in the city, it's what I'm focused on, is that these are human beings. We have a humanitarian crisis right now, 5,000 to 6,000 people sleeping outside every night. We also have neighborhoods that are suffering. I talk to people all over the city. The number one thing that they're saying to me is, listen, Colleen, I want to support our homeless community, but I am fatigued. I am tired. What is the plan? We don't know what's going on. And there is, sometimes, not all the time, some unsavory behavior that's happening that is hard on the neighborhoods, and we can do better.
Right.
Just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Right. And so, and should it be the city's now responsibility? A lot of times different things fall onto the city itself, and then ultimately falls on usually to the Seattle Police Department. But like WashDOT owns property that they are supposed to maintain everything else, and a lot of times it ends up being it falls on the city. That's WashDOT's property. With this Seattle Public Schools, this is Seattle Public Schools property. So how exactly is it that, everybody, Bruce Harrell the other day also said, okay, it's the mayor's office. I hear you saying it's the mayor's office, but this is private property owned by the school district.
Well, this is not the first time this has happened on a school district property. And so, if I was mayor, I'm running for mayor, I would work with the school district. I would get the outreach workers down there. I would use city dollars to support getting those folks into security and stability and away from the schools. That's what I would do. I believe that we need to have the political will and courageous leadership to move these folks into security and stability and away from the schools.
Right, and I know that Dr. Brent Jones, Superintendent of Seattle Public Schools, in a letter sent over there to the office of the mayor, I mean, basically, it's almost like Dr. Jones is saying, like, hey, we know this is here. We don't have the technical expertise. And the city is saying, we know it's there. We can offer you the technical expertise. And I don't know exactly where the gap is in between to be able to solve the problem. You know me, I'm like, I like to call people's bluff. I'm like, oh, word? You want to solve this, Dr. Jones? Word. You want to solve this, Mayor Durkin? Let's figure out just a way to solve it. You know what I'm saying? Because it sounds like both parties are very much willing and to find a solution here. I'm not sure what the exact technical or legal issue is that why it's not occurring.
Yeah, I can't tell you either. I don't know. I don't know why they're not moving. But I think that when you lead an organization or you lead a city and you are responsible to support that city, I think that it's your responsibility to get in there and to, get those folks into a stable place, into hotel rooms or wherever else it might be, and support the neighborhood. So I guess that I'm frustrated and want there to be more the more that comes from the mayor's office. And I just want to also point out that I think that the Seattle School Board has been very courageous and has said, we don't want to just like push these people out of our parks. We want them to get the services that they need. We don't want to continue the trauma that's going on here. And they've also had, a lot of people within their school who want to help support that kind of work.
You were out there in Bitter Lake. Are any services being provided? Because what I saw early on in reporting from out there was that another issue on top of, you have the school board in the city over here, but the people on the ground, that there's not necessarily any services that are being provided to them.
Right. I don't know for sure. I know that there has been quite a bit of uproar amongst the outreach community. There were folks who said they weren't going to sign their contracts because they felt that the city, the Human Service Department, was asking them to do things that they didn't think were the right way to do it. And so I imagine that probably has impacted that encampment. But I think I want to make it very clear for everyone who's listening today, because you mentioned this is an educational show earlier. Sweeps don't work. They are ineffective. They harm the folks that are in those encampments. We just move people around. We waste dollars instead of actually finding solutions. And so I think that's what our community is like thirsty for, are real solutions
speaking of real solutions, let's dive into that then here real quick, because it's an issue here that is constantly growing in our city, and I think sometimes a lot of people might not follow the what's going on with homelessness here in the city. If the numbers keep coming here, especially regionally, because people are able to come here and find services they might not find in some of the other 39 municipalities in King County or further out. I only say that to say that it's like, I don't think it isn't like something's not being done, but there's a constant influx, and maybe this regional housing authority might actually be able to make a difference with that. But what are some of the solutions that you see? Because the city has spent all kinds of money on all kinds of different things. The average citizen wants, people to be housed and for people to have a comfortable life. But what are some of the solutions you're offering?
Well, I don't know if you've heard, but I have a 22-point plan.
Oh, God.
No, I appreciate the question, and you bring up a really good point about the Regional Homeless Authority. So that will be what part of what I'm talking about. In that there hasn't been a plan. The Regional Homeless Authority, led by Mark Dones, who is a brilliant thinker and leader, will help us come up with a plan. And in my 22-point plan, it says at the top that we have to be aligned with the Regional Homeless Authority, and that has been an incredibly important part of us making that plan and moving things forward, because we have been spending dollars. There's incredible providers out there, incredible national leaders. Like Seattle's one of the cities that pioneered housing first, which is such a powerful way to think about doing the work. So with the Regional Homeless Authority, with a mayor who knows what they're doing around this work and has been successful in homelessness, I think that we can do some things that are new, treat this like the emergency it is. And then the final thing I'll say, because I could keep rambling about this for a long time, I could get into point 13, but I will not, is we have to build more housing. Affordable, truly affordable housing, and that is the other elephant in the room.
Right, and I hope somewhere in the 22 points is really a focus on upstream. I mean, a lot of times when people have now reached the street, that's that final point. There might have been a few steps upstream where there was different resources or options and everything else. Where a lot of times we treat the emergency, sometimes effectively, sometimes not, but we put so much focus on it, but we don't pay attention when it's important. They say what you don't do today that's important, tomorrow becomes an emergency. So hopefully there's some upstream target in there in your plan. So I know we got to cut you loose here a few minutes early today, and I wanted to talk about what are some of your big ideas now, for the city beyond this homelessness issue. I mean, we're a city that they said it's the fastest growing city in America. You know what I'm saying? By the way, we're not dying, and it seems like we've found our soul as well. because we're the fastest growing city
Yeah.
here. But what are your plans for Seattle if you become mayor?
Oh, I love that question so much because I think that one of the things that I'm most excited about is about being an ambassador for Seattle. I think we need to have, someone that's going to get out there that's going to be talking about what a beautiful city this is, what an incredibly entrepreneurial and innovative city. And so I want this city to become the easiest city in the world to do business. Like, I think that right now there's some barriers, there's things that we need to be working on as a community, especially as we come out of COVID. I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to be incubating small business in our BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, and ensuring that we have leadership right from the mayor's office that is aware of what some of those barriers are, and offering opportunities for our communities to build generational wealth and to be a part of this really incredibly vibrant city.
Right, and downtown it's been interesting the last few years.
Yeah.
You don't really get the feel that there's any genuine type of sincere relationships between a lot of our elected officials and and their appointees and things like that. I mean, clearly the electeds come together for photo ops around great legislation and things, but I think the general public gets a vibe that is like, nobody really likes each other. But, I mean, what if you're elected? I mean, how are you going to shake things up?
Yeah.
Man? I mean, clearly people don't have to get along to govern. And it's good when people have diversity of ideas. But it just seems like personal downtown.
Right.
You know, more than just a disagreement on ideas.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting for me is that I feel that as a person of color who lives in this city, I don't know if our white friends and relatives actually feel that as much. And I think that is a disconnect that we have to address. And Echohawk administration will be about, everyone being a part of the conversation. But I will tell you, having been that person on the other side of the table saying, hey, what about Native community? What about this? What about this? What about Native homelessness? What about housing? I will be very, very aware of those people that have been left out of the conversation. I just will, because I've been there. And so I think that a city hall should be representative of our community and should be equitable. And so I'm so excited about tearing down all the gatekeeping, of making,
Trey Holiday, I hope you're watching. That's Trey Holiday's number one thing is like, man, we got to get rid of the gatekeepers.
Oh, we do. Well, and the Western system, the colonized system has set it up so well for gatekeeping to happen. Even if you're like a leader of a nonprofit, like I was a leader of a nonprofit, I had to be aware that I was a gatekeeper, right? Like we just get stuck in these systems like that, right? So we have to be, I think as we move forward, as we look at this as a generational opportunity for our city to be a leader around the world in progressive values and being that city that's generous and compassionate and full of grace, like Sean was talking about yesterday, then we need to have leadership that has experienced, has been on the, comes from community that has been disenfranchised and pushed to the margins. Because when I'm leader of this city, all of those folks who've been over there, we're gonna be right in the mayor's office. We're gonna I keep thinking about the mayor's waiting room. Have you ever been there?
The mayor hasn't kept me waiting ever. No, I'm just playing. No, I haven't been there.
Well, but it's just like this very it's like not hostile, but it's cold. And I think it should be warm and welcoming while you're sitting there waiting to talk to me.
One last question for you here real quick. You mentioned Sean Good, and it was a real powerful statement that he made yesterday. And it's gotten a lot of feedback. And Sean talked about, guilt and grace and forgiveness. And in the work that he's dealing with young people who might have made a mistake. They're in the criminal justice system or on their way, potentially criminal justice system. And he said that he focuses on grace instead of guilt. When you look at our city ecosystem and things that impact us here, what needs a little bit of grace?
Well, number one, I'm just a huge fan of Sean's and Choose 180, so really appreciate that work. And I think that we need to give each other grace around our homeless crisis we're having right now. I mentioned earlier that people are frustrated. It can be hard to be walking down the street and have to walk over human feces. I mean, that is a reality here in Pioneer Square and in downtown. But let's think about that person who had to be in the most undignified position to actually put that human feces there. Like, what is that person experiencing? And I think that part of what I see as graciousness and as grace is trying to understand that person's perspective, and giving them and having compassion and grace for their situation. And I think that, you know, our neighborhoods right now are really like stressed. You know, we have, in my neighborhood, there's this really wonderful woman who has 8 tents right next to her now. And she had an arrow, I don't know why this happened, an arrow come through, there's been gunshots, and it's scary for her and her family because that's scary, but also she has a ton of compassion for them and wants to support them. And so we have to be balancing and choosing grace over fear, grace over frustration, and find ways to come together. One thing in my 22-point plan is a volunteer corps, because I have talked to folks all over saying, we want to help, we want to support, and so we're going to give people like actual nuts and bolts, like here's how you can do it. And I just think that idea of grace for each other in this time frame is just so beautiful, and glad Sean was here to share it yesterday.
All right, Colleen Echohawk, we're going to bring you back for your 22 points. And also want to talk to you about the Compassion Seattle Charter Amendment, what you're backing as well. And we're getting you out of here on time. Want to let everybody know tomorrow we have from the Seattle Times, Naomi Ishisaka, also a fellow Bulldog. What's up, Bulldog? So tomorrow, Naomi will be here co-hosting with me. So we look forward to that. I want to thank you again for taking the time to pop in and have a conversation. And, you know, the political thing is dragging on. And, you know, we're going to go primaries, all this and that. I'm extremely grateful for the first half of our show to be able to talk about these issues. They're impactful to Native American communities.
Well, I just want to say thank you for bringing it up. I mean, there's just not enough places where Native issues are talked about, and this is a Native country, a Native city, and we kind of tend to forget it. And I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. I don't know if everyone got to read the Seattle Times article, but it was a beautiful article. I didn't realize you were the Black Forrest Gump, but I love that. I was looking for my box of chocolates.
Life's like a box of chocolates.
But I think that the work that you have done and are doing is just so amazing and wonderful. So thank you for what you do. It brings a new perspective that is so needed. It's not a new perspective, it's just been unheard, right? So thank you for tearing down the gatekeeping.
Well, I appreciate it. You're welcome. Yeah. We're going to get out of here. And so, as usual, want to remind you to go forward in your purpose, go forward in your humanity. And we're right here, right there.
Right
there
here.
It is.
There we go.
And until tomorrow at 11 a.m., peace.
Peace. Thanks, everybody.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun.